Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. Call 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. And now, your host, Jordan Sekulow.
As you can probably tell right now, we have got another a snow situation and ice situation where our studios are located. So I'm able to broadcast from home, but our team was not able to safely get into the radio studio. So we'll have a special program airing on radio and Sirius XM. But we wanted to come live to our Facebook and YouTube and Periscope and Rumble audience to bring a live broadcast with you today. Than Bennett's also joining me, our Director of Government Affairs, just to talk about some of the breaking news that is out there right now. We don't want to miss a day, and we're grateful to our tech team and our production team allowing us to bring this to you every day because we know many of you who do watch online, this is the way you get the show anyways. But let me encourage you right off the bat, because so many people won't be getting this show on Sirius XM or on their local radio broadcast, to share it now with your friends and family, because you probably have a lot of friends and family who do get the show that way and they rely on it that way. But because one, a lot of people aren't traveling right now across the country because of the storms, but two, because this show will not be airing on those broadcast stations. It's just for you and our online audience. And I think it shows how much we appreciate you and your interaction with the broadcast every single day that we decide to come live just for you. But I encourage you, share it now with your friends and family. Let's get right into it. We've got the U.S. Attorney and the FBI now investigating Governor Cuomo's handling of nursing home deaths. It was talked about for months and months on end. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has done a great job highlighting this in the news, highlighting this in the media, unrelenting on Cuomo. And now Democrats are also starting to question whether or not he is fit to serve as governor after this scandal broke that in recent weeks the administration revealed it was 15,000 long care residents that have died from COVID, up from 8,500 that were previously disclosed. And, interestingly enough, then President Trump was on a couple of news broadcasts yesterday by phone. He did Greg Kelly's show on Newsmax, where I'm a contributor. He also did Sean Hannity's show. We do that show a lot, too. Sean's a great friend of ours, about Rush Limbaugh. But he was asked about the COVID situation and Cuomo on both those broadcasts. And, he brought up the idea that there is no excuse for sending COVID patients into nursing homes at all when the U.S. government, the federal government, provided New York with the USS Comfort and made the Javits Center into a hospital. And remember how empty it was. Why weren't all those thousands of people sent there instead of nursing homes? I mean, the mainstream media is not asking about it. They're not asking Joe Biden about it. But then, Governor Cuomo's got a lot to answer for. And now the FBI, which I know people are leery about FBI investigations, but the U.S. Attorney's Office as well in New York also looking into whether or not, when they're looking into it, they mean, is there criminal wrongdoing here?
Yeah, it's pretty clear to me, Jordan, that there was a whole lot of focus on press conferences and pursuing awards rather than on actual action, because you're right, there were ample options for Governor Cuomo to do something more responsible with those who were falling sick, especially in the early days of this pandemic, Jordan. We didn't know a whole lot about the disease, but we did know at that point that it was more lethal for the elderly population. We also knew that separation from the general population was a very important thing. And yet Governor Cuomo did not take advantage of the options that the federal government gave him. And Jordan, it sure looks to me, and I don't know how you can describe this other than a falsification of evidence, maybe twice as many deaths as were originally reported. Now he's saying that things should have been done differently. Jordan, let me tell you, that's another way of saying I got caught. He would not be saying that if he didn't get caught. And I will tell you this, I'm a little leery about the FBI sticking to the case here, but those U.S. attorneys have an obligation and a responsibility to pursue justice no matter where the facts will lead. Am I absolutely confident that they will do that without oversight? Not in every case, Jordan, but it is their responsibility and it's our job to hold them to it.
What's interesting about this case is that it really started with Republicans, because he was getting a pass. Now, finally, CNN has banned Chris Cuomo from interviewing his brother right now, or interviewing relatives right now as part of a news broadcast. But we all knew this was happening. But it took a lot of congressmen like Lee Zeldin, Elise Stefanik, and others who represent New York and represent. It was Janice Dean from Fox News, who does the weather there, who lost, I think, 2 parents to this nursing home COVID deaths. And again, it went on for months and months, but finally, what they call like his Secretary of the State, which is really like a appointed position by the governor, kind of spilled the beans in a call to leadership of the state Democrats. And since then, it's been really just an avalanche of new information about how poorly managed. This is a governor who was, writing books about leadership through COVID and being praised by Joe Biden, being praised as the example, taking the tough stance of keeping things closed. And at the same time, he was sending COVID patients into the most vulnerable people's homes and living arrangements in nursing homes.
It's been an avalanche of information, Jordan, but I have got to tell you, while there is Democrat outrage right now, Democrats speaking out, it's almost always coming after the revelation. And look, I just really think it's time where people in Governor Cuomo's party get out in front of this and say, look, it's more important that we provide transparency, accurate information, and a better plan going forward. And Jordan, let me just tell you, from a federal level, I'm still hearing mostly about things along the lines of Benny Thompson's plan to sue the president of the United States. Look, it's time for the Democrat Party in Washington, D.C. to hold their own accountable. It's time for them to focus on this problem because, Jordan, the vaccine is out. It's being deployed thanks to Operation Warp Speed, but we're not out of the woods yet. We need everyone on board focusing on the solution. And I got to tell you, I just don't think that's going to happen unless Governor Cuomo is held responsible. And quite frankly, I think somebody else probably needs to be in that position.
Yeah, I do too. I think this is a serious lapse in communication and responsible for people's deaths. When President Trump provided New York with more resources than any state because it was a packed city. It was a place where COVID could spread easily. It was spreading massively there. And he provided them an entire new hospital in the Javits Center. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Javits Center is this massive place where you could do trade shows. I mean, it's just gigantic. Turned it all into a field hospital. It was not used at all. Brought in the USS Comfort ship, which is the military's medical ship, wasn't used at all. And the question is, why weren't those COVID patients sent there instead of sent to places where people were the most vulnerable? Nursing homes, people already vulnerable to things like pneumonia and the flu and less dangerous things than a new strain like COVID-19. The question is, does the FBI, do U.S. attorneys hold anyone accountable? Ultimately, though, Than, the state legislature there, the party there, I mean, they can impeach. The states have impeachment power as well. You see this with Newsom. They have recalls in California. Do you think it's possible Cuomo could be impeached? I mean, a lot of people are just calling and saying, hey, forget that, just resign. I know that Lee Stefanik, I knew that Lee Zeldin, the congressmen and women who represent and are Republicans have just said, resign. Let's get somebody in there who can get their hands in control of this.
Well, it's interesting, Jordan. It wasn't that long ago that Governor Cuomo was saying to President Trump, resign or be impeached. And now that's being said back to him, resign or be impeached. And Jordan, I think the state party probably should at this point. Let me just answer a couple of your questions, at least from my perspective, though. You rhetorically asked, why were they not sent to the Javits Center or to the aircraft carrier rather than put in nursing homes? And I think the honest truth at this point is because he thought he could hide information better if he put him in nursing homes. He was less concerned about the care that was going to be provided or what the outcome was going to be as controlling the information, and he thought he could do it in those facilities better. There's just absolutely no excuse for it. And let me tie this just really quickly to one of the conversations that's happening in Washington, D.C. now through the COVID stimulus package. Jordan, this is a perfect example why there should not be a slush fund of state and local funds bailout in that piece of legislation. Because what would those dollars be going to? They would be going into failed organizations like failed states like Governor Cuomo's, and there wouldn't be accountability for them. If we're going to pass money out of DC, which look, we probably need to. We have a couple of times already. there's probably another need. Jordan, it's got to be targeted. It's got to go to the people who lost income. It's got to go to the people who are suffering. It's got to go to the places and the institutions that are caring for the sick. It must not go to failed administrations like Governor Cuomo's. And yet, the $1.9 trillion package that's moving through the Democrat House right now, it's got that money in there, Jordan.
Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on this. When we're talking about COVID relief too, and Cuomo, he's also got the state AG after him, Letitia James. And this is an interesting political note for everybody out there who follows politics closely. We have a lot of New York viewers of our broadcast and listeners to our broadcast that, he's up for re-election for a fourth term in 2022. She could certainly primary him, and she's looking to primary him. She's very popular. She's more left. And they're going to seize on this failed leadership. So instead of writing books on leadership, he should have been providing leadership and not have been afraid to tell the Trump admin. All they had to do was tell the truth. It may have been bad decisions that they made, but they wouldn't have had a U.S. attorney and FBI looking into them. They just needed to tell the truth. But you know what? They didn't want to tell the federal government because they knew that President Trump would point it out as a problem. And that's sick because people died. People died. We're going to stay on this. I know when we get back into the regular broadcast studio, we'll bring in Congressman Zelda, we'll bring in Congresswoman Stefanik as well, who have brought this to the forefront nationally because it matters nationally. Because I think some of the best leaders through COVID get no attention from the mainstream media because they don't like the way they've handled it. They haven't handled it like a dictatorship or autocrats, but you see how that's gone for New York. I want to switch topics in a second, but Dan, you said something interesting to me. You said in D.C., at the federal level, they're still so focused. This is where under the snowstorms and everything. They're still focused on this lawsuit brought by a congressman in the NAACP, a Democrat congressman, against President Trump and others.
Yeah, they are, Jordan. And look, I mean, I think if you put it in context, you think about the fact that when the pandemic was breaking out, they were focused on impeachment number one. And now as this scandal was breaking, they were focused on impeachment number two. And now as we look towards a much needed COVID stimulus, they're focused on suing the president of the United States. And by the way, Jordan, rejecting a bipartisan solution that would have had this COVID stimulus bill out the door already. That bipartisan package was available, Jordan. There were 10 Senate Republicans that went down to meet with President Biden. They were actually all relatively on the same page on the same amount of dollars that would go out. Maybe it would have been in one tranche or two tranches. But the biggest hang up on that negotiation was indeed the state bailout dollars. So, they're focused on suing the president of the United States. They're focused on moving a COVID stimulus package through reconciliation, which, look, let me just say that plainly. They want to pass it with only Democrat votes so they get all the credit. It's really as simple as that, because there was not the possibility that a stimulus package couldn't pass. They just wanted one to pass with only Democrat votes. That's why they're going through reconciliation. But here's what that means. It's going to take another month at least to get in the pockets of the American people. So there's just a lot of distraction. And I would tell you, it's time to get focused on the task at hand. But I'm not seeing that happen.
No, I mean, they can't answer questions on school openings. They're all, the CDC says open the schools. Kids are not at risk. The teachers' unions, of course, are the ones fighting back. Then they say, we'll get you vaccinated, teachers' unions. And that's not enough for the teachers' unions. They don't want to go back to school. They like this virtual learning where they don't have to actually go in and teach. They get paid for it. They teach through camera instead, which is really tough for young kids. It's been, I mean, all those reports have been out there about depression, suicide, drug use, just how horrible this has been for I'd say older kids to teenagers, and those, of course, trying to prepare for college as well. And the questions are all over the place. They say their goal is school will be open one day a week for the rest of the year. I mean, that's not very ambitious when you're talking about your first 100-day goals. I will point this out, Than. Finally, Joe Biden, as we were talking about it yesterday on the broadcast, finally called Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, as Rick Renell said, kind of a slap in the face to the Israeli government, but finally he made that phone call.
Here we are, February 18th, Jordan, when that phone call should have taken place on January 21st at the absolute latest. Look, I mean, when it comes to foreign affairs, this was quite simply a statement that was going to be made. I mean, the Biden administration wants to say, oh, now we've called them, we want to be friends with Israel. And look, I want them to be friends with Israel, too. It's the most important ally in the region. But there's only one reason to call 15 or 20 other world leaders before you call your most important ally. It's because you want to send a message. And Jordan, I'm just here to tell you, you know this, but I want our listeners to hear this. That message is not being sent in a vacuum. If you think back to what the Obama-Biden administration policy was on Israel, the very last move that they made before they left office was walking away from Israel, the United Nations Security Council, not issuing a veto on a censure resolution that the United States had been sort of the last bulwark against for decades and decades. That was their last move. Jordan, I see this, what is it, 4-week delay in calling Bibi Netanyahu. I see it nothing as a signal that that's the policy this administration wants to head back to. And look, I think there's probably a bipartisan majority in both chambers of Congress to push back against that. Here's the thing, though. It's only going to happen if we force the issue, because there will be Democrats in both the House and the Senate that, even though they're with us on this issue, even though they don't want the Biden administration to walk away, Jordan, they're not going to lead the way. And if people are quiet about this, they're not going to hold the Biden administration responsible for it. But I want people to remember what happened at the end of the Obama-Biden administration. I do think that's the direction they're charting again.
All right. I want you to continue to share this with your friends and family, whether you're watching on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, Rumble. Click those share buttons the various ways, because this is the only live broadcast that we're going to be able to provide today. Unless, of course, there was some major breaking news later in the day. We now know we can get to you, and that's great. And we can do that even when we're not in the office. I mean, our production team is doing this all remotely in connection with our different places where we are remotely as well. So just a shout out to them. But there is some good news to report, Dan, and that's that South Carolina has joined a number of states. 14 states are already in the process, or 10 have already done this, but South Carolina has joined them in a bill banning abortions after a heartbeat is detected. It's the greatest pro-life bill, quote, this state has ever passed, said Republican Representative David Hyatt. The Republican governor is expected to sign it. This is the South Carolina Fetal Heartbeat and Protection from Abortion Act. It's when you can detect the child's heartbeat, that you can no longer do an abortion, no longer provide an abortion. 14 states have heartbeat bills in various stages of development. Out of those 14, 10 states, plus now South Carolina, have passed the laws. Georgia, Ohio, Kentucky, Mississippi, Iowa, Arkansas, Tennessee, Louisiana, Missouri, and North Dakota. So there's a lot of action here on the pro-life legislation. Now, Than, we know they will be challenged in court. But what a lot of these states are saying is, we want those challenges because there's been a shift at the Supreme Court level. And because of that shift, if Roe versus Wade was to be turned around and said, this should really be up to the states. So it wouldn't be that if Roe versus Wade got overturned, that abortion would be illegal nationally. It would then be up to the states. So these states want laws in place if that were to occur. They know now it's an uphill battle, but if that were to occur at the Supreme Court, and they were able to have that state sovereignty back over the issue of abortion, they want to have the laws in place. And the South Carolina governor is going to sign this. Again, this is great I think for our audience who cares so much about these issues, that this battle continues regardless of what administration's in office.
Yeah, no question about it, Jordan. Why we say so often on this broadcast, comes the issue of life, the effort at the state level, at least is the effort on the federal level. And if you have House and the U.S. presidency, you can still engage these battles on the state level. Let me say just a word about the South Carolina legislation, and then also a word about the courts and the importance of judges and the change of landscape there. First of all, this bill in the South Carolina legislature, Jordan, just such common sense. We've talked before about informed consent laws, where if a mother is told about a procedure that's going to take place inside her, if they're shown an ultrasound of the life that lives inside her, if they're shown the truth that baby has a heartbeat, Jordan, almost every time that mother will choose life because of the reality of seeing the evidence of the life that is inside her. So, I think it defies common sense that if you're able to detect a heartbeat and you're able to show that you would allow that heartbeat to be stuffed out. And I think this kind of legislation that would prohibit that, combined with informed consent laws that would give that real information, just require that information to be given to the mother so that they are able to make a choice. Remember, the other side says that they're pro-choice. We'll give the mother the information to make the choice, and they will choose life. So great news in South Carolina. But you're right, Jordan, on the issue of the courts. This is why for the last 4 years we took such heart in the great strides that were made by President Trump in the United States Senate. 234 federal judges were seated during that term. Most of the attention goes to the 3 Supreme Court justices, but I'll tell you, 3 of the circuits flipped from Democrat majority control to Republican majority control. And Jordan, I mean, you think about the Ninth Circuit. 13 of the 29 judges were appointed by Republicans, and 10 of them, Jordan, 10 of the 13 were appointed by President Trump and confirmed by the last Senate. So as you start to see the cases come through the Ninth Circuit, no longer is that an automatic win for the pro-abortion left. More and more, you have an opportunity to win even at the Ninth Circuit.
So let me tell you this right now. We're going to get more into Cuomo. We're back on the air with our full broadcast, our full hour broadcast. We can bring in guests. We can bring in Congresswoman Stefanik. We can bring in Congressman Zeldin and others from New York who've been leading the charge to bring light to how, I mean, they're calling Governor Cuomo the worst governor in history of New York and the worst governor in the country. I mean, strong language, but people have lost lives, people who did not need to lose their lives because of the way these COVID patients were put into nursing homes. And the numbers are about double of what was being reported. And they were doing this because they weren't reporting the facts because of political reasons. So we're going to stay on that. We're going to stay on keeping you updated on where this COVID relief is. Why did they have to take this partisan approach, which delays the relief? And they already did an impeachment, which failed, which delayed the relief. Now they're taking an approach, reconciliation, which delays the relief even longer and puts the relief in jeopardy because you can't lose a single vote. They can't lose a single vote to get this through. They've got to keep all 50 plus get Kamala Harris to be the tie-breaking vote in 51. And we're also, of course, going to keep always updating you on the fight for life. I hope you all enjoyed what we've been able to do this week. When yesterday we were able to do the full live broadcast. The team was able to get in the studio. I hope we can get back in the studio tomorrow. And I know we will by next week. But even if we can't, we're going to be coming to you every day this way. So let me encourage you before we finish out today, share this with your friends and family. So click that share button because they're not going to get this show the traditional way on radio broadcast or on Sirius XM. So this is the way to get the best updated information from the ACLJ. And so click that share button, go to aclj.org. And we're able to do this with all the tech that we've got. Because of your support financially, the ACLJ, we can even bring you these live shows like this and connect all remotely this way. I think it looks pretty good. Sometimes there's connection issues, but everyone's dealing with that now with COVID and even on live television. So support the work of the ACLJ. Donate online at aclj.org. We are updating you throughout the day through social media on all of the issues. So whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, on aclj.org, follow us there, share this broadcast, and if you can support the work of the ACLJ financially, donate today at aclj.org. We will talk to you tomorrow, and I hope when we talk to you tomorrow, we'll be on our radio broadcast for the full hour. See you tomorrow.